correct. That is correct.
And at that time, would it be true to say that you knew that there was a risk and an environment of danger relative to the donor?
Yes, both donor and bond. Both. And myself for that matter.
And yourself. As it relates to yourself, at the time of your arrest, were you informed of your rights?
None whatsoever. Except, as I said before, why I was being held.
Was your other rights to instruct an attorney to telephone court? Were you informed of any of your other constitutional rights?
None whatsoever.
Were you aware at that time whether any of those rights we say are inherent were suspended? Were you aware of any proclamation that suspended those rights?
Yes, I was clear. As a matter of fact, specifically I asked to make a telephone call after I wanted to call Walter to tell him that I was in the law, not knowing that I was and I was denied.
No, but my question to you is, were you aware if those rights were suspended at the time? In other words, that you didn't have them?
Oh, yes, that's a different.
Yes. Did anyone tell you? Did you look at the calculation?
Okay, no one said to me that your rights are suspended.
Now, at the time that you said that you were being targeted, do you recall if Donald was also being targeted?
This is not a matter. I attended meetings and I wasn't aware of actually how he was being targeted. What I knew, and Donald too, was under surveillance. I absolutely knew that.
Could you tell us, because you said that you knew, under surveillance, by whom or by what?
Donald was employed as a public surveyor. And from time to time he would give me a lift to the job shop. On our way into the city, it was clear that we were being followed by one car or another car, sometimes by persons on scooters. It would be very clear they were tailing us. So to that extent, I mean, you're not someone asking about the test, you know that this is what's happening.
And my question to you, my sweet question to you, is by who you have surmised persons following the car?
Only surmise.
If you can, you get on.
Yeah.
Who was following you?
But it could only be persons who were working for the state. Could only be.
Now, you were asked a lot of questions by the council relative to Donald and Dr. Rodney being involved in matters that would have been hazardous to their life. At any time did Donald Rodney convey to you that he was involved in anything that would cause danger to himself?
You never convey that.
Also, heavy weapon was made of the fact that it was Dr. Rodney and Donald Rodney were the only two persons in Donald's car. My question, so I put in context, my question to you, was it unusual in 1980 for two brothers like Donald and the late Dr. Rodney to be in a car alone?
It wasn't unusual.
And tell us, and I know it may be tautologist, but tell us why it was not unusual.
Well, at that time, the WPA father had a number of vehicles that were going through their lives.
Yes.
Walter, at the time, even previously, drove a police station wagon. But at other times, he would also go around with in Donald's car. It's quite unusual.
Because, and there's the bare fact of them being alone in a car mean that they were involved in some type of court that either?
To my mind, no.
No. Now, I too have, I know you have read the book, authored by William Smith, co-authored by Anne Wagner. From your own knowledge, I'm not asking you any second-hand knowledge. From your own knowledge, do you have any independent confirmation of the series of allegations made by Gregory Smith in this book?
There are a number of allegations.
Let me be specific. Let me ask you specific ones.
I was just about to ask you to be.
At page 29 of that book, would you like to see it? Or
Yes, I would.
Could the witness be shown page 29 of that book? See the first paragraph on the top of the page? I made it clear to Dr. Rodney.
Yes, it speaks about dangers.
At any time, did you have
The public needs to be taken along with us. Remember the public. What is it you're predicting?
let me read it into the I made it clear to Dr. Rodney the system he wanted to employ would be very dangerous. Let me do it step by step. He understood all the dangers I depicted. I tried to persuade him not to use this system by recommending alternative system. I recommended two safer methods. The first method was the same used by the hobbyists to control model planes. The other made use of two receivers, one to switch the power on and the other to trigger the detonator. The system would require two transmitted signals to trigger the device on a percentage scale of 0 to 100%. This will increase the safety factor to 80 on that scale. To achieve this safety margin, we will have to use two transmitters to send the trigger signals and two receivers to receive the signals and to trigger the detonator. He left with the full knowledge of my concerns. At any time, do you have any knowledge that can independently confirm the allegations made here by Gregory Smith? Whether it was warning Dr. Rodney about any explosive or dangers of the system?
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever. That's your answer?
That's my answer.
All right, let me see my cross. Commissioners, Millennium Friends, I need to look at another part. Well, I know his vote has left Demerara, so let me just see what he's asking me to. If it's fairness, I will be fair.
Yes, before you get to that, this is indicated in the book on which you read this book that the safety event that was in relation to what is there. When he gave him that warning.
The warning from the context of the book would have been given some, it looks like weeks before. It would be 1980 because it's put in 1980 directly by the author. And it would seem to be, to my understanding, weeks before the events of 13th of June 1980. Because further it goes on to say you returned to my home a few days later, etc.
Thank you.
Because I am just reading what my little friend is trying to refer you to do. But it's fair not to ask the question in all circumstances.
Is it
second paragraph.
The second paragraph. You could go be.
Yes, just a minute.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Please proceed, yes.
Now, the book goes on to say, in the next paragraph, that Dr. Rodney returned to my home a few days later. He said the remote controls that asked for were available in Trinidad and they were expensive. These remote controls did not have the required range, as his brother and his military advisor had explained to him. On the second system, he told me that getting another set similar to the one that he had was difficult. Although he preferred to have a simple system in the interest of safety, he would try to get the additional sets. Now, it is my understanding, sir, that there were 5 Rodney brothers. Am I correct?
That's right.
Of the 5 Rodney brothers, who had a military background out of the 5?
Well, I'm aware I was the only one that had a regular exposure.
So let us do the arithmetic here. So out of the 5, you were the only one who had a military background.
Regular military background.
No.
So when I said regular, I said the name of you will have a military background without being in a regular service.
Understood. And I am not. You were the only one who had a military background. Take your hands. And I'm telling you that every time did you advise Dr. Rodney that the remote
Voices from the pit.
I'm trying to thought as being
This is part of the people. I think we have some quiet again, and we get to see.
I understand the disquieting, but I will continue. At any time, did you advise the late Dr. Rodney that any remote controls did not have the required range, and explain that to him any time that happened?
Absolutely.
So as it relates to you, as the only brother with a military background, what would you say to the statement made at page 29, lines 12, counting from the top in the book of Gregory Smith?
I said earlier, and I've gone through a paragraph and a half that you read. This is what Gregory Smith is saying here. It's part of a technician's purchase.
No, but hold on. Mr. Rodney, I'm asking you to speak first here. As it relates to you, if it's a true or false,
It's false.
will you then say that that statement is false as it relates to you?
As it relates to me, yes, it's false. Absolutely so.
Let us do a logical exercise. Of the 5 brothers, 2 experience in the field of walkie-talkies in 1980, as far as you know. Is that not you?
No. I have experience of the war in the 60s when I was in the Air Force.
So then, coming up to the 80s, and if you're ready to me, I'm not taking my questions today. Coming up to the 80s, you would have had previous experience with walkie-talkies.
No, I didn't after leaving the Air Force. After being demobilized, I had no contact whatsoever with any communications
But prior to 1980, you would have had previous experience. And the question that I want to ask, do you know of any other recipients, brothers, who have had experience of walkie-talkies?
As far as I know, but I will rule it out.
I understand. Now,
If I may, people do communications, people do correspondence courses. You'd be surprised at what people accumulate in terms of knowledge. The learning council told me that you went to law school with 2 words. You weren't there at correspondence course and you don't know. People go on and
you will direct that to council and you.
No, I just thought of it.
Understood. Now, you were told and asked a question by counsel that a witness who went before Ms. Karen D'Souza indicated that her words were spoken to her by Donald, that he said that there had been terrible accident. Remember that? Anyone else comment on that? You would agree with me, say that at the time that Donald would have approached Karen, that would have been shortly after that horrific incident.
I was aware after I came out of
Yes.
police detention and I visited others in a local hospital. Yes, I was aware that. Only then. I was
Only
aware
then.
after.
And would it and it was from Karen D'Souza when counsel asked the question to you that you learned that those words were spoken by Donald.
Vis-a-vis the Catholic standard, it was carried in the Catholic standard of that particular issue. So I learned it then. Because I had no money to Karen, I never used to see her.
That's what I want. So in other words, Donald never told you that it was a terrible accident.
No, never.
Thank you. And I think I dropped my last word. He never told you that it was a terrible accident.
No, he never.
And would it surprise you, pardon?
Until today.
Until today. And would it surprise you that Donald's actual words were, and I told him that something trouble had happened.
He may well have done that. He may well have done that.
Commissioners, may I just consult with my notes to make sure that I have not.
Council, I propose taking the mid-morning break at this point. 15 or 20 minutes. What time you have, Mr. Williams? I'm not sure of my own watch. I would want to give about 20 minutes.
About 60 minutes past 11 according to the
About 25 minutes.
Yes.
Yes, but who gives some thought? You're related to put to the witness a lot of questions based on what is contained in this book. But given what has been said about Smith, the role that you might have played, what way, what caution should be adopted in viewing what is written by him? Could it be, like he was serving, what degree of weight? This might be a question which you may have to address later. But it is worth raising as early as now. Very well now. On the 25 to 12, we will take up important questions.
That's asking you to take those again. We're going to have to ask you to take the oath again. So
Is it not enough to tell you still on hold? You suggested now that after every break, is it?
I would like to see council, please.
Mr. Rodney, you continue to be honorable. The obligation to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Can I start? Mr. Rodney, on the last occasion in answer to my friend Mr. Williams, you had mentioned some other invasions of privacy. And yet, you chose not to approach our courts to seek redress. Can you explain for us why it is you chose not to approach our law courts as a result of these illegalities?
There's no ambiguity here. He's answered the question.
Mr. Williams, you were addressing the chair?
Mr. President,
Yes, I think the question still stands.
one of the reasons for that, because I don't want to go into a dialogue, was that I was associated with the working people from their party. Working people from their party being a party led by Brady Ben and others. At that time, this was from 71, 72, 73 onwards, before the WPA was established as a coalition of groups, the WPA itself was under surveillance. Our members were searched. When we had public meetings, we had our transcripts, so we had our addresses recorded. So there was that, if you like, history that perhaps processed that procedure that occurred before what came back in. So you had an environment that was already set. So you didn't go and complain. You had just to take precautions.
The question is, why did you choose not to go to the courts? Did you feel that you could get redress in our present in the court system at the time? Or you had lost faith in our court system?
The court system, as it was at that time, definitely didn't favor working class parties. To answer your question. So we chose not to take redress to the courts over political issues.
Okay. Can you tell us which PNC president was in power when charges were instituted against Robert Washington?
The first set of charges would have been during the period of Judas North.
That would be all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rodney, you told us that you gave evidence in a coroner's inquest into the death of your brother. Remember?
Yes, sir.
And I believe this inquest was held in 1988.
That is correct.
Do you know why the inquest was held 8 years later?
To say with knowledge would be difficult. However, one could surmise that it was a direct result of consistent efforts made on the part of Mr. Yusuf and others, but mainly through his intervention and his activities and the WPA at that time, that inquest was held in 1988.
Thank you very much. Now, you have been referred to a book, which it has been said was written by one William Gregory Smith. Could he be allowed to look at the book, please? Do you know the witness now has a book.
Yes.
Were you aware of this book before you came here to give evidence, Mr. Rodney?
Yes, I saw it in bookstores some years ago, but I couldn't procure it at the time. Since then, it's been up to her. At least it hasn't been circulated.
Thank you.
I was aware of it.
Okay. About how many years ago you first became aware of this book? Are you able to assist us?
It will be at least 2 to 3 years, if not more. The only bookstore in Guyana that had it was sold out, so I couldn't procure it.
Now, you are aware that eventually a warrant was issued for the arrest of records made in relation to your mother's death.
Yes, I am.
And you were aware that this was in June of 1996.
Yes, Commissioner.
Are you able to say if you saw this book prior to or after 1996?
I saw this book after that, well after 1996.
Could you please refer to the beginning of the book and indicate whether there is anything in the book which tells us what year it was published? First, published.
It does indicate on the fly leaf, Madam Commissioner, copyright 2007, on the fly, second fly.
Thank you very much. Now, you told us, sir, that you considered that you were under surveillance, yourself and your brother Donald, because you would have persons or see vehicles tailing you. Remember you told us that?
I did.
And you concluded that these were from the police?
But they were in civilian clothing, so the conclusion had to be made that way, yes.
You also told us you were a member of a particular party. Can you remind us, please?
The political party which I was affiliated with, the Working People's Management Party.
Thank you. Was this party, for how long, as far as you know, this party continued to be in existence?
It was formed roughly around about early 1970, plus 69. And it continued up until 1978, 79 perhaps. Even afterward it was killed, it still existed. Roughly 2 years. And then it was no longer a functioning organization. So roughly just over a decade.
Was it affiliated with the People's Political Party?
The People's Progressive Party.
Sorry.
Well, actually, it wasn't affiliated. It could be described as being an offshoot or a splinter, if one wanted to use that term of the PPP, in the sense that its leaders or its leadership originally were part of the PPP.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaya.
Thank you, Mr. Rodney. But I was thinking, Mr. Scotland, you are representing Mr. Donald Rodney.
Yes,
Do you propose the court to testify for us?
indeed I do.
Why? Because I was, when Mr. Williams was at his turn of priest, I was thinking about our terms of reference. And that the phrase used by Karen D'Souza, which I think she told us that Donald came knocking on her door and said he had been terrible accidents. We wanted to ask him, but if Donald will be coming, then perhaps it is more appropriate for me to ask Donald rather than asking Edward.
He will be coming.
He will be coming.
I think we tried to deal with the issue in questioning the witness about that statement, and he didn't answer the question.
No, well, I was speaking for myself. I would prefer to hear from Donald about what he allegedly said to Mr. Souza. And since you tell us you will be calling him, then I don't propose to ask Mr. Rodney, this Rodney, anyone any questions.
I understand.
I'll reserve whatever is going through my mind when I pick it up.
I only say that there's always an opportunity that I say that presents itself to be part. He will be coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Rodney.
Right before your brother was his death, the deeds determined and articulated that he could not get rid of the then government by means of the ballot box, that he was prepared to consider valid means. Right before his death, did he begin to articulate that position?
Learning Commissioner, I think, first of all, the question of what this statement always has, a statement always have political violations there. And they could not really be separated from either street corner meetings, or public addresses, or even meeting interviews. So he may have said that on more than one occasion, but what I do know is that on every occasion that he spoke to people, so far this hasn't come out this year. He always had a message to people and used the whole question of violence in a very analytic and specific way, explaining to them what violence meant in terms of ending their own activities. So it would have been a more than one occasion.
I was interested in the time frame, though. When before his death, over what period? 2 to 3 years before, 2 years before, 5 years before, did he commit himself in consideration of violence as a means to get rid of the then government?
Lord Commissioner, in 1979, the WP as well as Walter Rodney declared 1979 to be the year of the term. That year, a number of political dictatorships changed hands. The year of the term. So it would have been between 1979 that it became more opportune, more popular, more widespread than previously. So that was year number 1979.
And that expression, the year of the term, what did you understand it to mean?
The year of the term meant the year where Eric Gary, the Shogun, Idi Amin, and I think one other dictator in Africa were overthrown. And it was being said not just by Rodney, by people in the region, that Burnham or Guyana dictatorship would also go the same way as these other regimes. 1979 gave a term meaning a turn, a change, a transformation from what the regime existed.
Thank you, Mr. Rodney.
Before Mr. Rodney, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to be fair to Mr. Rodney, to Mr. Souza, and for the accuracy of the record, the verbatim transcript of the proceedings on the 29th of April reports Mr. Souza as saying that there was a very urgent ringing and banging on the door, and found that it was Donald Rodney banging at the door, who said, according to the statement, that there had been a terrible accident or something terrible has happened, and he had to go. So just to be fair, we do not have it recorded here as the one thing, but alternative in terms of what may or may not have been said, and that's on page 69, just for the accuracy of the record.
Thank you very much for that proper context. Proceeding Council, the next witness, before you do so, I just thank Mr. Rodney. I would Thank you very much for coming. You want the third occasion on this time. I think you had 3 bites at it, no fault of your own, that it's taken so long. So we thank you for coming and sharing what you know, your experiences, standards of the field of the Thank you.
Thank you.
You see quite a list.
Honestly and sincerely affirm that the evidence that you present does not fully the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Whether you can simply just go to that. You are UC quite out.
I am.
And where do you currently reside?
I didn't hear that.
Where do you currently reside?
Oh, I live in a place called San Diego, the USA, California.
And may I please ask how old you are?
A month ago, I was 89.
Do you recall the years leading up to the death of Dr. Walter Rodney?
Yes, I do.
Did you submit a 20-page statement that you signed to the commission, to the secretariat?
Yes, sir.
And would you be able to recognize that statement if you were to be shown it?
Yes.
I wish to show the statement to you. Could you say for us whether this is the very statement that you sent to the secretary that you signed?
This is it. Thank you.
And you had an opportunity to peruse it earlier today?
I read it through last night and I had it today, but I couldn't read it. I had people talking to me.
Mr. Coyle, you are aware of the terms of reference in this inquiry?
I think so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would I ask that the statement be tendered as an exhibit in this matter?
Can I get it too, or can I get it, propose an analogy?
Proposal is EK1, and EK1 should be marked into that exhibit.
Came on, and it's so that he came on.
Now, Mr. Coyle, from time to time, do you wish to be refreshed from the statement that you have submitted?
I would welcome that because of the length of it, you know, because I don't want to miss the relevant issues. So if I omit anything, I'll welcome my attention being drawn to it.
Could I ask the witness be allowed to have that statement in his possession for the remainder of his testimony?
But we do this so practically.
Mr. Coyle, can you tell us a little bit about the atmosphere in Guyana in the years leading up to Dr. Walter Rodney's death?
You speaking political, economic, social, general, you need to be more specific.
Yes. Can you tell us the political, legal, social, economic, or any other atmosphere you could guess it. And here's the
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to interrupt my friend's question, but those are a whole panoply of issues. Maybe he can segregate them into different elements.
I share your view, and I was just about to tell them one at a time.
And so then,
Commissioners and Council, I wish to speak on the political atmosphere in particular, especially as it affected organizations and the person of Walter Rodney himself. And when I speak, I'm talking about the excesses of the ruling party at the time, as Dr. Walter Rodney used to call them, the ruling clique. And I am not talking of their supporters who wished them to be in power or anything like that. I took my beginning from the time of Dr. Walter Rodney's return. When he returned, there was already a very closed kind of society developing. I just want to know whether I'm being heard. Because I'm talking and I can't tell. There's a very close kind of society developing. There had been an election in 1973 in which the ruling party declared that it had won a two-thirds majority of the seats in Guyana. And this was really fantastic. One example of that, what proves that fantasy, is that a man named Mr. Arnold Rampersad was charged with murder. This was a political case. He was a member of the PPP. He was charged with killing a constable named Mr. Henry. Mr. Arnold Rampersad charged with killing Mr. Henry at a tolling station on the quarantine. And the government applied to the court on the quarantine to have the venue changed to Georgetown. And the ground of that change of venue was that the jury might be prejudicial to the state, which had just won, swept the board in all parts of the country. This is I am submitting it as evidence that something was not consistent. The Working People's Alliance, of which I am one of the founders, it was a coalition of several groups, and the whole point was to get groups together that represented different races which had been split since 1955, when the original People's Progressive Party split. This organization, from the first, even before Dr. Rodney returned, incurred a mysterious kind of hostility because its members had spoken out severely against what took place in 1973. I myself was interviewed by the press about the elections of 1973. The Catholic Standard had called it fairy tale election. And when the press asked me about it, I said they were really selections and not an election. And the Working People's Alliance was formed in November 1974. That was when it announced its formation. the office of Mr. Moses Baldwin, attorney and law. We try to get something printed because we believe in working with printed material that we put in the hands of people for them to go home and think about. Our paper, The Day Clean, was printed by Tapia House in Trinidad and Tobago, Port of Spain, I think. Because no one here would print it. Because there had been a ban on newsprint. Newsprint had been restricted. So those here who know about the right to freedom of expression and those other rights that have to do with communication would see that the population was under severe restraint. No printer would print our paper because they fear they might be penalized. You have to apply to the government for a quota of newsprint to get your papers printed. When our newspaper arrived, it was seized at the customs, and it was not banned as subversive literature. Oh no, the government was too conscious and too devoted to the people to talk of subversive literature. They issued a trade order banning this commodity from Trinidad and Tobago. It's as if you're banning saltfish or newsprint or something else like that. So the paper was they never allowed us to uplift the newspapers. In fact, they were all made into a bonfire. But many of the public servants got copies and began to circulate them. It was into that atmosphere that Dr. Rodney had returned. I think he was already there at that time. But this was the built-in attitude of other people trying to have a say in the political life of the country. When Dr. Rodney himself came, in fact, before he came, he had applied for a position at the University of Guyana, and the academic board appointed him to the history department. I'm not a university person, so I'm not too clear about these things. The academic board appointed him to a position in the history department, I think at its head, and then the University Council, which has been a political body, and I think still is, overturned that appointment. My impression is that it had been done previously in 1970, and this was the second time. So, here we were. And before the formation of the Working People's Alliance, the organization that I belonged to, which was mentioned by Mr. Edward Rodney, the African Society for Cultural Relations in Independent Africa, which we call ASCRIA, considered this ban. The whole country was looking forward to Dr. Walter Rodney, even before he set foot in Guyana. From the time he was banned from Jamaica and came to the notice of the public as a son abroad, he was a very popular figure in the imagination and hearts of the Guyanese people. So when he was banned in this way, our organization went and took a decision that this is a slap in the face of the nation, and there should be some response. Now, we could have gone as an African organization and made a response, but we said no. You see, whenever Dr. Rodney visited the country, I must make it clear, as you can see from that question that was asked to me about my age, he was not of my political generation. He was of the younger political generation. And in my philosophy, the young forces have to be nurtured, or the whole organism would shrink. So we met and took a decision that we are not only going to protest, everyone was protesting, but we are going to develop a national coalition for this protest. We spoke to the PPP, and we had been at odds with the PPP. We didn't see eye to eye. We were on the other side. We were in conflict with the PPP. But we knew that whenever Rodney came to the country, he would visit Freedom House and visit Aspria. Those were the two political organizations that he would visit. So he said, it would not be fair to Dr. Rodney to have a sort of protest of one race of people. And since the PPP has a large constituency among Indian Guyanese, at that time in particular, we went to them, we went to the Working People's Vanguard Party, which you have heard about. We went to IPRA, the Indian Political Revolutionary Associates. We went to other parties like the Liberator Party, which was not a radical party of the left or anything like that, but a normal conservative party, somewhat to the right. But we didn't care. We said, this is everybody's business. Everybody has children to be educated. This man is an outstanding scholar and teacher. And so we began to mobilize in the country, hold public meetings to protest the dismissal of Dr. Walter Rodney. Naturally, this raised a storm and great resentment from the government, and they let it be known that this was not a welcome step. Our public meetings were attacked. Our public meetings were assaulted. And I can say, I hope I'm not going to be asked for names, because I'm not carrying out a witch hunt. I'm talking about what took place. Everybody knows the House of Israel. It had a radio program. Its leader was Rabbi Washington. And it's in that sense that I'm talking. And many innocent people fell into it because of something I shall refer to as ethnic insecurity, especially African insecurity in this period. And he was able to appeal to Africans and convince them, many Africans I should say, not everybody, and convince them that they were in fact Jews. And this I suppose gave a lot of Africans of the lower income group, especially those who were down and out, and some others to a sense of being somebody, because Jews were very much known in the world at that time. The Holocaust was a great item of promotion and contention and so on. So that was the House of Israel, and they became a kind of street force for the regime of the time. Our first meeting was held at the corners of Durham and Louisa Road. It was virtually broken up. And then there was another meeting at Midland Cumming Streets. You had to borrow current from the owner of the building, and this was a store building with glass, show windows. And the records of that meeting went to work, smashed windows. Dr. Javan was talking at the time when the assault began, because you see, if you want to understand the sort of mechanism and motion of the society into which Walter Rodney came back, it was not the time when, it was after the violence of the 60s, racial violence of the 60s. And it was not the time when Dr. Javan speaking in Georgetown was a welcome thing, especially for the rifle party. I refer in my statement to a legitimacy war going on. And this is just another form of description that I'm using in my own analysis of the political situation in Guyana. I think for this purpose, that is a more updated explanation. There was a legitimacy war between the PPP and the PNC as to who was the rightful ruler of Guyana. So, the PNC, ruling at the time with a 2/3 majority, could not allow certain people to speak to the citizens of Georgetown. This was a massive meeting. Nothing like it had been seen since the 1950s, when the popular United People's Progressive Party, before the split, won the elections hands down. The assemblies, the public meetings were large, multiracial, everybody, and energetic. But that had died since 1955. And there was, dismay, disappointment on every hand, triumphalism also among those who won, and such things. So I'm trying to explain why this attack came. It was not out of the blue. They felt it was a challenge. And we had no right to give a microphone to their rival. Apart from that, apart from Dr. Javan, others of us were also resented. Mr. Takuma Ogunse, who will be giving evidence here, chaired that meeting at the middle and Cummings. And while Dr. Javan was just opening his speech, a policeman, I think it was, came up and stopped him. When Takuma Ogunse tried to defend him, he was charged with assaulting a peace officer. He was charged with assaulting a peace officer. There's been some recent scripture in the press about this incident, and I may be getting irrelevant here. This is just my own personal story. Anyway, that meeting was broken up, and it was a massive meeting. Apart from that, there were handbills given out attacking the present witness in other respects and so on. So that was the atmosphere. Now, this did not stop there. It permeated more and more areas of life. Freedom was really closing down. As Walter Rodney said in one of his speeches, when you lose the right to choose your government, you're in danger of losing everything. And this is exactly what is taking place. The 1974 was, of course, a remarkable year as well. Now, the point I want to make really, for purposes of this inquiry, is that there was spite and fear and hostility to Walter Rodney even before his return. We all know that it said it had to do with the fact that Walter Rodney at the street corners was a very effective person, very effective speaker, and that he had called the head of government King Kong, and had made other remarks to his discredit. But it's interesting that this hostility had begun before that. The head of government did not wait on any of these things to deny Walter Rodney employment at the University of Guyana. Secondly, that protest was not only domestic. From all around the post-colonial world, protests came. One which I've selected and put in my statement is one from Professor Ali Mazrui, a Kenyan scholar of great eminence, not of Walter Rodney's generation, either closer to mine. And he wrote a letter to the ambassador of Guyana in Washington, D.C., to be sent to the government of Guyana, pleading that they do not make the mistake of shutting out a person of the quality of Walter Rodney from the educational institutions of Guyana. I am paraphrasing the letter.